Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Susan Standfield. She's the founder of Couch. She's online at healthjusticetees.com. That's tees spelled T-E-E-S. Sue, welcome to the Goddard Report.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Sue, I'm pretty sure Couch stands for something. What is it?
It's an acronym. Sort of a silly word, but it worked. The Coalition of Unvaccinated Canadian Humans. So it's not for animals, it's just for humans. And there is an animal rights movement around vaccines, so that's why I wanted to put that in there.
If people are interested in joining the Couch Coalition, where can they go?
Okay, we're about to launch. It's primarily kind of a design coalition to find the members and like-minded people who will advocate in their communities with employers or travel restrictions. So the first online place will be an Instagram account, and I'll have that set up next week. I've got a lot more interest in this than I thought, so I'm kind of flooded with messages.
So why did you start Couch?
Well, in 2018, I was threatened to be jailed for 6 months and fined $250,000 because I would not be giving my children's vaccine records to the British Columbia government. It was an order in council that I believe Bonnie Henry was behind. As soon as she was appointed, this thing showed up in the system. And I thought, okay, I have a bit of a legal background. I grew up in a world of lawyers and judges. And I thought, wow, there are people who are using legislation to threaten people like me. I better figure out this legal part. And it's just really grown since then that we're going to have to become a protected class status of people, just like disabled or ageism, older people, seniors, gay rights. We're in that same world now. So that's why I thought we're going to need a coalition to protect our rights and to lobby.
So did you end up paying a $250,000 fine?
We pushed back so hard on the members of the Legislative Assembly for a year and a half that they reduced the fine to $2,500, which is still injurious. But none of them would do anything about it. They could strike this thing down. They could vote it down in Victoria, but they won't. And that's when a lot of us realized, okay, we can't actually count on our elected officials anymore. They don't have the moral courage to go up against the pharmaceutical industry.
So where are we at, and how did we get here?
What a good question. Watching too much Netflix, not voting, checking out, the general passivity that has overtaken many Western countries until now, because I believe, it's my personal opinion, that we've had it so good for so long. We don't have muscles to deal with human rights violations because we haven't generally experienced them in Canada. I've lived and worked all over the world in countries where this is rampant, and those people are more aware and awake to what this is. But it hit Canadians, it blindsided them this last year, and many of them still don't believe that our system is actually possible of doing this to them. So not being awake, and then also the benefit of having a country that mostly had good human rights track record, right? But no more. That's over.
Have you tried going through the BC Civil Liberties Association or the similar national one?
Well, again, we've spent almost 14 months trying to get a hold of lawyers and experts, and they all say the same thing. And everybody will tell you this, and they're not bad people, but they will all say, this is beyond our scope of expertise, or they're too busy. And they either think there's no money in the case, which isn't necessarily true, or they just don't know what to do. Well, that could be it. But I think a lot of it is they're nervous. Everybody's being threatened at the moment by the government, or they just simply actually don't have it. I started my human rights career in the downtown east side of Vancouver economic justice. And there are a lot of lawyers who are trained to deal with what we call low-track human rights violations, sex workers, drug addicts, people who are kind of committing small petty crimes, and so they need legal representation. But there's a dearth of lawyers to deal with this kind of stuff. There's employment rights lawyers, but we're not always dealing with that. So it's a great time to become a human rights lawyer dealing with these kinds of violations. It's a huge opportunity in Canada right now.
So where do we go from here?
We do what I've been doing for 14 months and millions of people like me around the world is we educate, educate, educate. We make democracy, justice, civil liberties, human rights cool again. And there's two ways to bring down corruption. One is you fight the bad guy, and the other approach is you uplift the good guys, the people. And that's what I have mostly chosen to do. And that's our future, a more aware, a more proactive society that is very knowledgeable in terms of what public interest law is and why these laws need to exist to protect us.
With lockdowns, face masking, vaccines, and vaccine passports, are we witnessing crimes against humanity?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it seems shocking to a Canadian to hear that about our country. But we know that genocide is possible because Justin Trudeau admitted it 2 years ago. We're a country that has created genocide for 150 years with our Indigenous people. But more so than that, I would say that it's an attempt to normalize the walking back of our progress in the Western society. I studied this at Queen's University. This was my major, the philosophical and intellectual foundation of what human rights are and how they are required to run democratic societies and democratic governance systems. It's an attempt to force Canada away from that system.
How precious and rare is democracy? Because I look at the membership of the UN, and I'm just going dictatorship. They pretend to be, like Russia, pretends to be a democracy, but they're not really one. Because anybody who opposes Putin ends up in jail or mysteriously dead from poisoned underwear. So, should we really be aware of an attack on the democratic processes that we have in Canada?
Yeah, and I guess the first question is, how democratic was it ever, really, right? When you look at things like the Privy Council. Well, I always refer to what Marianne Williamson said when she was running to lead the Democratic Party against Trump. And she said there's two different political systems in America. There's the real normal one that we all live in that is very democratic, where people don't litter and they don't hurt people and they, make way in the parking lot, and democracy is alive and well in Canada. But then you look at our actual systems of governance and the legislatures and the House of Commons and all these formal structures, and that's where democracy is missing. It's actually missing in the formal structures. So this is our big objective, and it could take 20 years, it could take 30 years. We have to literally break apart and rebuild our governance structures, keep what is good, and get rid of what is overriding our rights. Like one good example would be to demolish the Orders in Council tool. We have to get rid of Orders in Council because they will always be used to overrule our rights. So we have to get rid of those. And that could take a couple of years to pass laws in every province to strike these things down. So that's where the intellectual education, the bigger picture starts to come in, and it's exciting. Justice in these kinds of subjects are really interesting to the average person. They'll want to talk about them at a bus stop. You don't have to be educated with a university degree. It's a fascinating area of interest for most people, but we have to bring it down to the common person and get it so it's a cool topic again the way it used to be. I grew up in the 70s, and this is what we grew up talking about around the dinner table and watching it on TV with our parents. So we can do it, and Canadians are ready for it.
Do you recall that it was an old British show called Yes Minister, when you talk about secret powers that governments have, and the Prime Minister of Britain would want to bring in some legislation, and then his bureaucrats would explain all the reasons why it just wouldn't work, and this is what they are going to do even if he passes that legislation. In other words, the government wants something to happen, but as I guess we call it what? The secret society, the deep state. Yeah,
and I would also add to that, massive amount of what is bureaucracy now across Canada. I was told, and this could be wrong, but that up to 25% of British Columbians are employed by the government. I mean, our governments are so big that they're this machine that it just turns to exist in itself that requires fuel every day. So a smaller government is where we should go as well. You know, a lean, agile, small government. South Dakota, I think, North Dakota or South Dakota, Kristi Noem, the governor, she talks about that a lot. Small government, let people take care of themselves, but a lot less corruption can happen in a small government. And so, like I said, these are processes and changes that could take decades.
Your thoughts on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the first Prime Minister of Canada to be found to be ethically wrong, not once, but twice and almost 3 times there over the WE scandal?
Yeah, that's a whole other interview, and Bill Morneau's role. I have a theory that may be wrong, but it's an interesting one. I think the WE scandal was used as a way for Bill Morneau to get out of power, because our BC finance minister also resigned at the beginning of the COVID fraud. Carol James. Now, she said it was because she was sick. But when you see finance ministers resigning, you know there's corruption going on. Unless they've been doing it for 5 or 10 years, right? And so Bill Morneau was out of there very quickly last year. And I have a feeling that the WE scandal was used as a way to get him out, because he resigned right afterwards. And everybody forgot what he did, and who cares about the $40,000? But he washed his hands of it. He just walked out the back door, and he's not implicated in anything.
Well, he's found to be ethically in violation of the rules of Parliament, but the maximum penalty is a $500 fine. He's a billionaire. What does he care?
Well, it's not about the money, it's his reputation. He's a really smart guy. He's a very successful, very smart guy. And the last thing that I would do if I was him was want to be sitting around the House of Commons all last year, because everybody now is complicit in essentially what I'm calling by proxy high treason. This is foreign money, so that's by proxy, that's been pushed into Canada to violate our rights. And that's something that someone like Bill Morneau does not want to have at the bottom of his CV, to finish his political career with that. So we'll never know. Will we ever know? But it's interesting that he's gone, and he was probably one of the most powerful people in the country.
So your thoughts on Justin Trudeau himself?
Well, I always feel very compassionate towards people who end up doing the wrong thing, because I believe that people are inherently very good as well. He's not all bad. He's not all good, right? There's gray areas for everybody. I just think that he has lived his life and has chosen the route that a global government and an international way of ruling the world is the right choice. And so he did whatever he felt was necessary to make that happen. And he talks about that all the time. So does Freeland, right? They're a part of these global groups. But the negative is those are complete violations of sovereign law and of sovereign rights. And you can't do that. You can't just throw your nation under the bus because you personally believe in globalism. So the truth will come out whether the average Canadian also believes that we should be in a globalist world or whether we should be a sovereign nation state. And I don't know how the young people are going to answer that. I know how my generation feels, and that's where the democracy will come over the next 10 years. If Canadians have the opportunity to completely rebuild and reshape our governance, our nationhood, and our state, and what we are as a country, what would we do? What would we build? And you see this happening all over the world. Like Nunavut is a good example. That's one of the newest sort of sovereign entities, right? It's not a state, it's a province, obviously. But what did Nunavut want to become? What is this self-actualization governance? That's what I studied, the Enlightenment back in the 18th century. What do the people of Canada want? And the government should get out of the way and facilitate what the average Canadian wants. So it could be an incredible creative time that we face in the next 10 years. Don't think it's going to be all doom and gloom, but it could be just unnecessary and waste a lot of time and money if we're going to have to keep dealing with people who violate rights. I'm hoping that it's going to be former, that we go into a new age, a new sort of renaissance, a new enlightenment. I call it the Enlightenment 2.0, where Canadians wake up and they realize they have the opportunity to rebuild our country. What a great opportunity, right? Other countries have done that. Brexit, right? England with Brexit, they've made big choices to change their country. So will enough Canadians care? Will they get outside the house? Will they show up at rally? Will they bother? That's the big thing, is will they bother?
Should Canadian politicians swear an oath of allegiance to the Canadian Constitution rather than the Queen?
Yes, and they should also swear an oath to the citizenry being the head of state. That's our problem with our structure, is the Crown is the head of state. We got to get that out of there, and we got to make the citizen as the head of state, and that's what the allegiance is. You know, it's not like Liz is taking money from us, like those days are over. But this whole Crown system that governs our resources and our laws, that all has to be pulled out. It's 200, 300 years old, and it doesn't work anymore. We're in the 21st century. We need something new. You know, it's like wearing shoes that were designed 150 years ago. We have to reinvent and redesign governance for the 21st century.
Is Canada being run by foreign influence?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not on the, like I said before, this day-to-day basis where we all interact one another. There's huge power there, and that is happening. But I live near part of the Trans-Canada pipeline or whatever it's called being built. You should see the money and the trucks and the investment in this. And Canadians are getting these jobs, but we're not deciding what's going on. You know, we are the second biggest country in the world. We are resource rich. The deals that are going on in our country, and also using our money like the pensions, and that's where Bill Morneau really probably should be investigated. What did he do? What decisions did he make with Canadian pension investments? Where is that money? And what's it being invested in? That's the kind of stuff the average Canadian is not told. And we really need to start looking into those financial books.
Does China own Canada?
Oh, that's such a good question. They are, their main initiative, Belt and Road, right, which people can look at if they don't know about it, includes Canada. So the big global Belt and Road initiative that they're undertaking includes us. And so we are affected by that, you know, financially, and they have an agenda here, absolutely. The hard part about that is Chinese, the Chinese community and culture helped build Canada over the past 150 years. This is a new thing that the Chinese communities here. I grew up with Chinese people in Shaughnessy on the west side of Vancouver. My grandmother used to get her groceries from them in the laneway. They would come down the laneways of Shaughnessy with groceries in a cart, and that's how they created some of the great wealth. Like, that's how the wealth of London Drugs was built, through Chinese produce businesses. But now it's different, right? So I would separate it. It's not just China. It's Communist Party of China versus Chinese people or the culture. And some of it is so positive for our culture, but a lot of it is not. And that would be the stuff connected to the Communist Party.
Well, when the so-called pandemic broke out, the Chinese government sent messages to recent immigrants to Canada calling them warriors, and it was their duty to send all the PPE they could find back to China. Does that bother you that they consider these people who have moved to Canada as warriors on behalf of China?
Yeah, interesting. Well, cultures have done this all over the world from time immemorial, right? I lived in Africa for 12 years, and all of the stories exist there, all the European countries that just colonized and pillaged and raped Africa. So I don't have a problem with that so much, because that's just a reality. That's economic colonization. But I take it with a grain of salt, because who actually knows what is true in the mainstream media anymore? I don't know if I would even believe that. What was that? Who put that there? Was there an agenda, right?
Are people scared to criticize the Chinese government because they're obviously not racist, but again, there's the Chinese government and there's the Chinese people, and they're two very different things. But they're worried if you criticize the Chinese government, somehow you're going to be called racist.
I don't know if that exists. I think the average person's a little more savvy than that, but I'll tell you this. I watched an interview by one of Hong Kong's top media publishers, Jimmy Lau. I think his name is Lau, L-A-U. And he's been followed and jailed and all this stuff because he's promoting democracy in his media empire. And he says there is huge division in the Communist Party, and the leader, I can't even remember how to pronounce his name, is on the verge of being turfed, because a lot of good people in the Chinese Communist Party do not agree with what he's doing. You know, it's like any political party. There isn't full agreement. And he has to go in front of them in the next year or two and be approved as the leader again. And Jimmy Lau believes that he's not going to be approved. and that he's on the verge of losing his power within China and within the Communist Party. But that's so complicated. How would the average Canadian get that kind of intel, right? That's very specific to being inside China, inside the power structures there.
Well, it's just like the story about getting a kidney transplant. If you ask the right people in Hong Kong, they can find one for you for about $100,000. And in China, they just find somebody to execute. They shoot them in the head to make sure the kidney isn't damaged. In fact, they do it in such a way the corneas of the executed person aren't damaged. And the guy, for $100,000, found a kidney for his father, and it turned out the person inquiring was a reporter from ABC, just trying to find out. And they use people from all kinds of different groups the Chinese government doesn't want to execute to harvest these human organs. Of course, the Chinese government denies it, but that's why he went through that process to find out, yeah, this really does happen. We'll have more with Susan Standfield right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Susan Standfield. Sue, what's causing people to wake up?
Well, I think we have to credit the internet, right? It's the pipeline of all this info. I lived in Libya, and my husband was kidnapped by Muammar Gaddafi because the internet was empowering people, and you could see it everywhere. They were learning what was going on in the world when they had not been given access to that. So that's a big part of it. And I think also too, the greedy always get a little bit too greedy, and what this small group of powerful people have done to the world was just a little bit too greedy. It's just a little bit too unbelievable for the average person. They shouldn't have been so greedy, so they did it to themselves, really. And people who went out into the trenches and, fought for months and almost 14 months now straight, taking chances to get the information out there. Millions of people have done that to help others. So under the most, egregious circumstances, like the fact that our governments are threatening to close our businesses and threatening to lock us in prison and fine us, is just it's so unbelievably corrupt that I think it could take 2, 3, or 5 years for the average Canadian to process the injuriousness of what has happened to us.
Is the mainstream media under more and more pressure to cover what's really going on?
Well, I think what's happening now is they're starting to leak out a little bit because they're realizing how liable they are and how culpable they are, because they made a deal at the beginning of this. They're all basically part of the same cartels. Pharma, the media, these huge corporations. Okay, we're going to run this pandemic simulation, and that's what it is, right? And a lot of people inside have confirmed that. And so they went along with it. And my background is media, so I saw it right away, as many people did, right? So now the media is really in trouble, because if they had not colluded, we would expose this within a few days. But if the media had actually done their job of proper investigative journalism, they always would have said two sides to the story. So if anybody is really in trouble, I think it's the media governance teams, the executives, the legal affairs department, because everybody's starting to look at them and say, well, if you lie to us, that's almost even more costly than being the criminal. But to lie and cover up the crime is worse.
Well, what I found so much isn't so much what the mainstream media says, it's what they don't cover. It's a crime of omission.
Yes, absolutely. And I was being interviewed by Radio Canada in French, and she turned the camera off after 2 questions. And I said, you turned the camera off. And she smiled, and she basically said, I won't be allowed to air this. And so she just stopped. And that cost a lot of money. That was probably $10,000 or $15,000 of equipment rental and booking and labor that was wasted. And that was her choice she knew that what I was saying would not be approved by the editorial board.
Well, Harvey Oberfeld, a retired Ottawa television journalist, said we criticize the Chinese media for being censored, and he said the Chinese counter saying, you reporters in Canada censor yourselves. You know what your boss won't allow you to air. So if you dig up something that's politically inconvenient, you know it's not going to make it to air, so you don't even bother asking about it. It seems to me it's exactly that case. And another example of mainstream media not covering anything, you never see anything on television about concerns raised about 5G and possible damage to human DNA, the DNA actually of everything that's alive. And you take a look at Rogers owns City TV and News 1130 Radio in Vancouver. They'll never cover a story about 5G. Shaw runs Global TV. They don't do anything about 5G. Bell owns CTV. Well, Bell's not going to do anything that criticizes 5G. CBC's Hockey Night in Canada is sponsored by Huawei, so I'm sure they're not going to do anything about 5G either. You can see how you're not being told everything that's going on out there. Sharon Noble, who does a lot of stories about 5G, said when she approached CBC about it, they said, we can't do the story. Like they're already under orders. So here's what people have to understand. It's not what they tell you, it's what they don't tell you that what can hurt you. So after COVID, what could the new economy look like?
Oh, this is the most exciting part. You know, we are an economy. Justice is an economy. And this was all about money and power. And that's what I've done. My work has been focused on economic injustice. So the faster everybody starts getting out of these big systems and creating a new opportunity for themselves to earn income, to hire other people, we're just going to economize our way out of this corruption. That's what they're after anyway, is this money. A lot of people will be afraid to, and they just won't, and they're going to get stuck in this system. But innovators and designers and anybody who's been an entrepreneur, opportunities are immense right now. You know, this is the classic in entrepreneurship, is you solve a problem. Well, the world has never had so many problems for 7.5 billion people, and the economic opportunities are just as big. So I say to people, get busy, go make something, go sell something, and, you know, create opportunity to get out of this. That's the future. That's where the winners are going to be. That's where the safety is.
Your thoughts on the push for Bill C-10 that would allow censorship of the Internet in Canada?
Well, I don't know the details of it. I haven't read all of the language, but I think the most important question is, why does the government want to censor in the first place? You know, we need to be having those discussions philosophically. We need to be having them a lot all the time. Why does Justin Trudeau feel like he needs to silence some Canadians? And then it's a matter of Canadians will know what's fair. Okay, certain things should maybe not be on the internet, things that are violent or degrading or criminal, but that's not what this is about. This is about, you know, limiting, again, going back to this limiting of kind of the Western perception of liberty that we fought for so long to have, and where we are in the 21st century. It's about rolling back those liberties and sending Canada backwards.
Well, I know the cloak that they're trying to use here is they're saying they're trying to regulate Canadian content. Well, I'm Canadian, you're Canadian, the people I talk to are Canadian, we're produced in Canada, yet for some reason we're viewed as not Canadian, and they either want to punish us economically or just cut us off. Is that what you think this could be all about?
Maybe, but it's way more than that. I really subscribe to the fact that we're being forced into a social credit system like exists in China, and it's being used culturally and economically. And it's about digital money. My former MLA MP up in West Point Grey of Vancouver is Joyce, I can't remember her last name, and she's the head of digital government, and that's what she's doing now. She's building a digital government and a digital economy. So some of these things are going to be, you know, good and necessary to make us an efficient, you know, country in the 21st century. But it's all in the details, right? It's all in how these things are done and the liberties that we give up. Trudeau talks about that quite a bit when you see him doing his updates. He says two things. One is, yes, it's important to have the discussion of human rights, but at the same time, you know, and then he always has this but thing, We need to have access. He's fighting for the right of the government to override those liberties. And that's the thing that should scare most people the most. That there's actually a discussion, an organized discussion in the Prime Minister's office. And he's going to be gone one day. That's what everyone has to remember, right? All these people come and go. He's just doing a job temporarily. He's going to be gone. And it's not about what one Prime Minister thinks. It's about building the integrity of our structures and our systems. And that's to me what I hope is the biggest wake-up call for Canadians, is we need to focus on that. As X-ray, look at an X-ray in the doctor's office and you see broken rib, and you're like, oh, that's one we have to fix. We have to start looking at how we choose to be governed as a people, the consent we give to be governed, and start changing and removing the things that don't serve us.
The notwithstanding clause in the Constitution, I thought that was the biggest mistake ever made, because we have governments using it all the time to override personal rights and freedoms. In Quebec, they're totally destroying their English community because they just find another way to violate your right to speak English or to write it or display a sign. In the rest of Canada, you don't see anybody fighting to stop people from displaying a sign in any other language, do you? It's only in Quebec. Would Canada be a freer country without being connected to the monarchy?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And why not go for it now? The faster we do it, the better. And that's the question for every Commonwealth country right now. And the Meghan Markle, Harry, that whole thing, that's an example of this too, that, most of the European monarchies have divested their power in this sense, and these families just live normal lives and they don't rule like the British monarchy does. They're kind of the last one. This is the big last one to fall. And so that's an opportunity for probably 4 billion of us. I think 4 billion of us live under Commonwealth rule. And it's just time, but we have to fight and win these things. It's throughout history. Power doesn't give back power to the powerless, right? Power is taken from small, powerless people. And that's where we are now. Everybody needs to do that in a way that's peaceful and compassionate, but we have to just take back our power and redesign and rebuild these opportunities in every country. The good thing about Commonwealth countries, the system is, if we can get this going in some of the bigger ones, the smaller ones could benefit as well, and it literally could be like a house of cards all falling at once.
Your thoughts on a monarchy run by King Charles?
Oh, God. Yeah, I don't know. Isn't it going to skip him? I thought it was skipping him. He doesn't seem like such a bad guy. I think that Charles is an intelligent, obviously well-traveled, these people are incredible people in some ways. But it's just the whole system itself. They're employed. They work for the firm, right? They're doing a job. They are paid to do a job. They're like lieutenant governors. So it's not so much them being bad people. It's the fact that the job exists in the first place.
Do you think Christian churches are being targeted by the police and politicians?
Yeah, I think that this is part of this new China model, that to break down the institutions where people have the intellectual and spiritual and philosophical discussions. That's, again, I'll go back to the Enlightenment. It's one of the greatest awakening periods of history, and that's what they talked about then, is how do we want to be governed based on our spiritual beliefs, our philosophical and moral and spiritual beliefs. So the houses of worship, they're always one of the first things to be attacked, and same are women and families. That's what they take down first. They take down the women and they take down the houses of worship. Then they blow up the communications, food, and transportation systems, and we've seen that happen too, right? Closing up the border, the restaurants being closed, that's the food system. Communications, now we're seeing internet. This is classic war tactics, and I watched this happen when my husband was kidnapped. Airports were bombed, the internet went down. That's how you shut down a society. It's food, communications, and movement. So we're seeing that. We're watching it unfold right in front of us, but it's very subtle. So the average Canadian doesn't see anything exploding yet, but it's happening in a very gradual way.
Does peer pressure guilt have a desired effect on people to do things they normally might not do?
Yes, for sure, and it's the power of the media. As you know, they're just watching something and they're walking out. Like, there's two people coming towards me. It's a beautiful sunny day and they're both wearing masks and they're outside. They're doing that because they believe that they are helping people. The media has told them, if you wear a mask, you're protecting your fellow Canadians. They're good people, right? They're trying to do a good thing. They're not bad people, but they're being lied to. It is pressure, but it's, I would say, more than that. It's propaganda and brainwashing.
Good versus evil. Who's winning there?
Oh, good always wins. Good always wins. Evil, corrupt, unnatural systems atrophy eventually. At some point, they don't laugh. They just can't laugh because they don't have a naturalness to them. And an example of that is when you walk along the sidewalk and you see this asphalt that the world has built covering up the natural world. And then you see this tiny little dandelion fighting its way through a crack in the sidewalk. And I feel like that's where we are now, that good is winning, we will win, and maybe the slower the better actually for us in the long run, because it's giving people muscle that we didn't have before. We're earning it back, and that is better. It's raising children. You want them to learn those lessons the hard way so they remember them forever. You don't just want to give them the easy way. So we're raising ourselves, I guess, again, in a way in Canada. We're relearning everything, and I'm grateful for that every day.
So if people want to follow you and find out more about Couch, what should they do?
Okay, go into my personal and business channel right now. The Couch one will be set up next week, and just share the story, get lots of people on the Instagram. I know not everybody's there, but it will help us in the beginning. We're trying to get to 1,000 members as soon as possible. I've reached out to Bobby Kennedy's team who works in Canada to see if we can get a couple lawyers who we can hire, who will actually be able to do actions for people who are facing discrimination. Someone who bought my T-shirt said she's being threatened to be fired over vaccination. So that's a perfect example. Like I said, we have a dearth of these lawyers. So my Instagram for my business is Health and Justice. That's Instagram. My personal Facebook page is Susan Standfield. There's a D in the middle. Most people can direct people to my pages. I'm getting pretty well known across Canada, and I'm always posting about the Couch stuff, about 2 posts a week. So follow that and just spread the word and anybody can get anyone who's interested in the rights of the unvaccinated. Just start talking about it because it's very real now. We have to become a protected class.
Can you remind people again, what does Couch stand for?
Okay, it's an acronym that stands for the Coalition of Unvaccinated Canadian Humans. And I like the word. It's a bit goofy, but it makes people curious because I've been saying, like many of us have been for a year, get off the couch. It's time to get off the couch and take back your rights. So I'm a designer and I love using beautiful designs to communicate stories and campaigns, and that's why I chose it. And it's a bit weird to see this couch, but it's working. People are talking about it.
Sit on the couch if you don't want to get a prick when you sit.
Yeah. Well, it's just about the old-fashioned stuff, right? Get out the door, meet people, talk, mobilize. That's what democracy is. It's not sitting at home fighting with people on Facebook. That's not democracy. There's no wins there.
Now, there's talk of vaccination passports. You won't be allowed to go to sporting events or go into restaurants, perhaps, unless you have this vaccination passport. Is that just another start of mandatory government ID and they know where you've gone, where you're going, where you've been?
Yeah, but it's not working. There was an announcement by, who was it? Somebody, the World Economic Forum or one of these big groups announced that people who are not vaccinated should be terminated from their employment. And it had so much blowback that they removed the information in the statements. It's not going to work. It can't work. So they're going to be in for a surprise with that. Some people may choose to do that, right? And we want people to have choice. People want to sign up for that, they can. But airlines aren't going to be able to discriminate like that. It's just far too injurious. It's not going to last. And again, it's just stories in the media. None of these, like the hotel quarantine, it's not real. People are just walking out of the airports, but the media started saying to people, oh no, you have to do this. And so someone sees it in the media and they actually think it's happening or it's a law, but it's just a lie in the media. So that's why, again, like what Marianne Williamson said, what's really going on is what we need to focus on, not what we're being told by the media. Two different worlds in Canada.
Susan, thank you so much for being on the Goddard Report.
Well, what an honor. You're a great interview. Good conversation. This is what we need to be having every day across Canada. Thank you.
Well, Bill C-10 goes through, this may not happen. I may not be allowed to interview people anymore.
Oh, we'll figure out a way.
My guest has been Susan Standfield, founder of Couch, the Coalition of Unvaccinated Canadian Humans. Now, she was just saying she's trying to get websites and so on up there so you can contact her. In the meantime, if you have any questions for her, because I think we'll be talking to her again relatively soon, you can send those questions to info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.